Good morning, good afternoon, I guess, at this point, or just about this point. Great to be here. Um, yeah, I think we're coming on the heels of a quite interesting talk. We're going to be talking a little bit more about DNS abuse here. And I'm going to tell you what I hope is an interesting story. And so, kind of building on what we heard from the wonderful talk we just had from Barbara Jansen about why we need to tell interesting stories, I hope this is going to be an interesting story for you as well, because we're going to show you some attack vectors. We're going to talk about how we have tracked a whole bunch of attacks on the Ethereum name service and then the Web3 ecosystem itself. We're going to show you what those attacks look like, and then talk about the adequacies and the inadequacies of the legal remedies and the law enforcement remedies with respect to DNS abuse. So with that, who am I? Right? I'm Alex Urbelis. I'm a lawyer, believe it or not. I'm the general counsel of the Ethereum name service, and I'm a first-time attendee here. It's great to be here, and I'm really honored to be presenting in front of you, and I really want to thank you all for being so generous with your time and your expertise and your friendship here. It's really great to be at DNS-OARC, and I think this is a great conference, so thank you for having me. I do lots of things. I'm one of your more technical lawyers, probably. I was I've kind of been on both sides of the fence. I used to work in defense. I used to work in intelligence. I was in private practice for a while. And I was also a CISO. I'm still the CISO of the Ethereum name service, and before that I was the CISO of the NFL, the National Football League. So I do a bunch of things, and I'm one of your more technical lawyers because I started out in this world, and my entire legal career has really been propelled by the fact that I was a hacker. And that was how I really got into technology, how I started learning about the DNS. And that started way back in the 90s, and that's something that's kind of a thread throughout my entire career here that's been pushing me forward. And as my mother used to put it, I'm a hacker who became a lawyer, so that means I went from bad to worse. And so, moving on from there, let's talk about the DNS, right? This is something pretty much we all know. The DNS is dangerous. This is exactly what Michael Kalberg said yesterday when he talked about new domains. He said new domains are dangerous. I think he said something like that. I remember it stuck in my head, and I said, yeah, he's absolutely right. I'm in the right place here. And so yeah, DNS is dangerous here, especially when it comes to attacks on Web3 and DeFi type companies here. We want to talk about ENS for a quick second, the Ethereum name service. Everybody's got lots of preconceived notions about what Web3 is and what we're doing to the DNS, but I want to say ENS, I think, is the original Web3 company here. We started the whole notion of Web3 with the ENS protocol, that it gave a naming system to the Ethereum blockchain. We've always believed in the primacy of the DNS, and the DNS is a source of truth. And that's part of our Constitution with our DAO. Article 4 of our Constitution basically places the DNS on a pedestal and requires us to interact responsibly with the DNS. And we gave a talk about this last week with ICANN and the Registry Operators Workshop. You can talk to Ulrich about that, and he saw me speaking at that last week, and we were talking specifically about responsible Web3, Web2 integration. And so this is, an issue with us here, though, because we're a Web3 company. We've got lots of digital assets, all Web3 companies that have DAOs, that have tokens or any kind of digital asset, and domains themselves are digital assets, and that's one of the things that we create. These are really valuable targets for nation-state actors. And what we uncovered and what we pulled on with respect to a threat of attacks on ENS really wound up being something a lot bigger. So what we saw first, and this is part of this whole DNS is dangerous thing, was many years ago I built a DNS-based threat intelligence platform, and we still use it every single day to detect new attacks on ENS and lots of other players in the ecosystem as well. And what we do is we scour zone files and we look for things. ENS is a weird string, though, because it's involved obviously in lots of different domains. So you have tokens, you've got ensemble, ENS is just, a string that's in a lot of places. So what we do is we basically go through all the zone files we get from CZDS and other places. .se is wonderful enough to allow us to perform zone transfers and scour those zone files. And then we do basically regular expression matching with grep to find, ENS plus certain strings, and that might be send, it might be airdrop, it might be token, it might be DAO, Web3 related terms. And we started seeing a lot of these domains all of a sudden popping up. Tons of them, I would say, maybe like 3 or 4 a day, and then maybe sometimes 10. It was a little bit weird. And so they always had the same type of configuration too. They were always pointing over towards cloud or with their NS records. They were trying to hide their host. We didn't want us to know who the host was because that makes it more difficult to perform some kind of takedown. We also saw as well was that there was a consistent thread of using hacked Twitter accounts to try to propel scams using these domains, or use of Linktree in the background that would, through a hacked Twitter account, then try to drive traffic over to these particular domains. And so the attacks were really stood up very quickly, very polished, and very well. And this is what they look like, right? So it's an impersonation of the ENS site. And what happens is, you would land on the site, there might be a bogus airdrop or something like that about a token or reclaiming your domain or something like this. But essentially what happens is there's this wallet connector here, and this will connect you into a drainer. And so if you do connect a Web3 wallet to this particular malicious actor, they're going to start draining your assets. And that's what happens probably to thousands and thousands of people. And still, these attacks and these threat actors are still active today. So the consistent thread that we found was really weird here. If we looked into the DNS data, we saw lots of things that were the same. NiceNick as a registrar, Cloudflare as a host, all of this stuff, not surprising, right? But what was really weird was the registrant organization. And because GDPR doesn't require certain registrars to mask the organization, GDPR protects people, not corporate entities, not organizations. So if you looked at the registrant organization of some of these domains, it showed up as Lolita LLC. Well, what the hell was that, right? That was weird. Lolita LLC. It's obviously like a bogus LLC. But what we found there was, pivoting on that, over 2,200 domains associated with that registrant organization, all created within the same year, within last year, targeting the entirety of the Web3 and DeFi ecosystem. And these are the real domains that we had found, over 2,200 of them. So it was kind of scary to see this and see that they had live attacks all stood up so quickly on these, but not all of the domains were active all at once. So what I did was I did a little script through, and I wrote a bash script that would every 10 minutes go through the list of all 2,200 domains, because like I said, not all of them were active right away. And what we wanted to find was, can we find them right at the point where they are about to be active? Can we get a list of all of the attacks at once? Because the bad guys are very smart. These threat actors are smart. They'll register a domain, they'll sit on it for 6 months or something, and then activate it at that point. Because the longer a domain is in existence, the more longevity it has, the less likely it's going to be scored as something that's malicious. So they would sit on it, and what we would do is iterate through all 2,200 domains every 10 minutes, and if another one of them was configured with NS records pointing to Cloudflare, we knew that an attack was going to be stood up. So then what I wrote script to do was to perform a wget-m with the target domain that was just stood up, because at that point, the bad guys are very likely going to have some kind of open directory structure in their domain when they're setting it up, when they're configuring it. Able to scarf down a lot of their and some of their drainers, and we got some data about who they are and their connectors into Coinbase and certain identifiers and things. A lot of their code was obfuscated, not surprisingly, and difficult to unriddle, but it was effective, and it still is effective at determining where these attacks are going to go next. So it's a fairly reliable early warning system, and just, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 lines of bash to get this done. So that's kind of fun. And these are what the attacks look like on the ecosystem. All of these are just screenshots of live attacks on other Web3 or DeFi companies. And again, all of these have DAOs, all of these have tokens, all of these have some kind of digital assets. And the volume and the velocity at which these are being stood up is really extraordinary, and still to this day. And they're using other registrant organizations in the Whois data in a very weird way. So there's a lot of these attacks that are still happening on a daily basis. They're still connected. So moving on, what do we do about all of this, right? A lot of people here, I would imagine, are familiar with UDRPs. By show of hands, how many people know what a UDRP is? Okay, so about half. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but yeah. So UDRP, a little primer here, stands for the Uniform Domain Name Resolution Policy. For those of you who haven't had the privilege of working with UDRPs, it should be UDNRP, by the way, right? I think ICANN, thinks domain name is one word or something like that. But so it's a mini arbitration that happens to try to reclaim a domain name from a cyber squatter, a typo squatter, from a malicious actor. You have to prove bad faith registration use of the domain. It's a legal proceeding that happens entirely on the papers. There's no witnesses, evidence, etc., though you can submit affidavits and whatnot. If you prove bad faith registration and use, the domain then can be canceled or transferred to the complainant. And so we did that with a bunch of these domains. We've taken back quite a few of them. But the problem is that's reactive. You're always chasing it. You can never get ahead of the game when you're filing UDRPs, right? It's just, and they take weeks. So you can't have these things standing up. So a modest proposal that we had, and this is what we're doing right now. We're working with the Security Alliance for Web3 companies called SEAL. We're sharing intelligence throughout the ecosystem about these particular attacks. We've shared the list of these domains with others. We're reporting abuse. DNS abuse obviously is an ongoing issue with ICANN. The recent additions to the Registrar Accreditation Agreement, the amendments that took effect in April 2024, require registrars to act now, but only on sufficient evidence, actionable evidence. That's a problem because that requires an attack to actually be stood up. And if an attack is stood up, it's too late. People are going to be victimized. So DNS abuse is something we need to evolve and talk about the inadequacies of legal remedies and the inadequacies of technical remedies, even when we're asking registrars to do more with less. So I think what we're trying to do here is evolve the UDRP system as well, and we're trying to go on the offensive here. We've a lot of companies that all have the same grievance. We've got a lot of companies that are being attacked by the same threat actor. We think this threat actor is really sophisticated. It's either a extraordinarily slick criminal enterprise, but more likely a nation state that is very interested in the acquisition of stolen digital assets, possibly to fund something like a nuclear missile program. That's what we're talking about here. So there's serious stakes, I think, when it comes to these types of attacks and taking them down. So what we're trying to do is evolve the UDRP process so that we can take out thousands of these domains together. One of the things we're doing right now is trying to put together that coalition so we can have essentially what would be like a class action to take these back. And then what we would love to do is have a greater and wider conversation with all of you about how we can use these domains once we get them. Because what I would like to do is configure them. Going back to the 90s, when I used to work in Web 1, thinking about the server environment variables that are in web server logs, things like the HTTP_refer variable, that would give us really interesting and actionable intelligence about where people are clicking in order to get to these bad sites. I would like to be able to take the attack one step back and take it farther, closer, and I think nearer, more proximate to the threat actors themselves. And so this is what we're doing. We're trying to evolve this place and this space in a way that makes the legal remedies more effective, the technical remedies faster, and I think will float us and kind of make the entire community safer together too. So that's what I've got here. I hope this was a fairly interesting story, and I'd love to speak with you all further about how we can share this intelligence, how we can work together and make this place a little bit safer for everyone. Thank you all.
Questions?
Hi there, Joe Aberley, Cloudflare. So you didn't mention whether you attempted to report things to Cloudflare since that was part of your signal.
Yes, we did. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we do all the time.
We host a lot of free accounts, and I guarantee that our abuse response is not perfect. So if anybody has a problem with things like that, you know people here, so you can ask. And if we can find fast routes into abuse reporting, then we'll do our best.
I appreciate that very much. And I'm not pointing the finger at Cloudflare.
No,
I just want to be, you're just a favorite service provider, I think, for the threat actors.
I think anybody who allows free accounts and free zones to be created at the rate that we do is going to suffer abuse. It's constant problems. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd love to speak with you further about some kind of, quicker reporting line, because we've used your abuse reporting function so many times. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Lars Egger at Mozilla. So
thanks for the talk. That was really interesting and a lot less blockchainy than I feared when I saw the title. So thank you for that. That was actually,
Thank you.
That's
very
probably
kind.
one of the best Web3 talks I've ever heard.
Oh.
So one thing I want to point out, so all of these attacks, right, or most of them will go through a browser at some point.
Yep.
And I wonder if you talk to Safe Browsing.
Yeah, we have talked to Safe Browsing as well as MetaMask and others as well.
Right.
So yeah,
there's a Safe Browsing version 5 rolling out now, and I think we might be the first non-Google browser to do it. But basically, it's a real-time thing where questionable website requests from browsers will be vetted in almost real time. So you can stomp on those like within ideally minutes.
Wow.
if that actually works. So that would be worth investigating, I think.
Absolutely. I love that. Let's do it. Let's talk together. That's why we're here. Thank you.
Hi, Ross Gibson with Infoblox. As probably one of the few rare DNS guys who also happens to be a lawyer, I just wanted to say I really appreciate you trying to reform the UDRP process.
Oh, thank you.
It's clearly written by a lawyer and not somebody who has any technical background. So
that's right. Yeah.
I appreciate
that. Well, I'm sorry to hear you're a lawyer. So nobody's perfect. This is the thing. Yep. Yeah.
I'm a DNS
exactly.
guy.
Yeah.
I had
Likewise.
a diversion in the past. Some of us had made bad decisions in the past.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Well, appreciate that. Thank you, Lars.
Thank you.
And I think that's it for me.
Thanks a lot, Alexander.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate it.